The cameras were still rolling when Linda Pace turned away from the $50,000 check, pushed it back across the podium with both hands, and said she didn't want it. Not a single person in Studio 2 moved. Linda was 67 years old, a retired school nurse from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, wearing a yellow cardigan she'd owned since 1994, and orthopedic shoes her daughter had bought her for the trip. She had just won Family Feud's Fast Money round with a perfect score. 200 points, the first perfect score of the season. And Steve Harvey had handed her the oversized ceremonial check with both hands and a grin so wide it reached the back row of the audience. And Linda Pace had looked at the check, looked at Steve, and slid it back to him like she was returning a library book. Steve Harvey's mouth closed. Then it opened. Then it closed again. A PA near the soundboard would later say it was the only time in 12 years of working the show that she had seen Steve Harvey without words. It was a Thursday in September 2021, and nobody in that building had any idea what Linda Pace had already decided before she ever walked through the stage door that morning. Linda had driven herself to Atlanta from Baton Rouge. 9 hours, alone, stopping twice for gas and once for a biscuit at a rest stop outside Meridian, Mississippi. Her daughter Carla had offered to come. Linda had said no. Her son Dennis had offered to drive her. Linda had said no to that too. She had packed one bag, set her alarm for 4 a.m., and pulled out of her driveway in the dark in her 2009 Camry with a thermos of coffee and a piece of paper folded in her shirt pocket. The paper had a name on it and a room number. She had been carrying that piece of paper for 6 weeks. Her family, Carla, Dennis, Carla's husband Troy, and Linda's 14-year-old granddaughter Brianna, had driven separately and met her in the green room that morning. They were wearing matching royal blue shirts. Linda's said "Mama" on the back. Brianna had added a small, hand-drawn star next to the letters with a fabric marker. But the real story hadn't even started yet. The name on the piece of paper in Linda's pocket was Marcus Webb. Room 412, Ochsner Medical Center, New Orleans, Louisiana. Marcus was 43 years old. He had been Linda's student, not in a classroom, but in a school nurse's office at West Side Elementary in Baton Rouge, where Linda had worked for 29 years. Marcus had come to her office the first time when he was 7 years old, sent by his second-grade teacher for a stomachache that turned out to be hunger. Linda had kept crackers and peanut butter cups in her bottom drawer after that. Marcus had come back for crackers on and off until he aged out of elementary school. That was the extent of it. A child who came for crackers, a nurse who kept them stocked. Except that at Marcus's mother's funeral in 2019, the family had found a journal. In it, Marcus had written, at age 9, "Mrs. Linda at school keeps food from me. She doesn't ask why. I think she knows. I think she is the reason I am still here." The family had mailed a copy of that page to the school. Linda received it 3 weeks after she had already retired. She had read it once, put it in a drawer, taken it back out, and kept it in a frame on her nightstand ever since. Marcus Webb was now in room 412 at Ochsner Medical Center with end-stage kidney disease, on dialysis 3 times a week, waiting for a transplant that his insurance company had approved in theory and blocked in practice for 14 months. The approved in theory, blocked in practice machinery was by now familiar in its cruelty. The transplant center was in-network. The pre-transplant evaluation had been covered, but the immunosuppressant medications required for life after transplant had been classified by the insurer as a Tier 4 specialty drug bundle, requiring a separate prior authorization submitted by a physician who was not Marcus's current nephrologist, and therefore had to be re-established as a new care relationship, which triggered a 90-day waiting period, which expired, which triggered another prior authorization request, which was denied on the grounds that the documentation had been submitted by the wrong provider type, which had to be appealed, which was pending. Marcus had been on dialysis for 3 years. The average wait for a cadaveric kidney in Louisiana was 5.7 years. He had been on the list for 2. His transplant coordinator had told his sister, quietly, in a hallway, that the medication authorization needed to be resolved before he could safely move up the active list. The cost to resolve it, to hire a patient advocate and a healthcare attorney to cut through the authorization chain, was $50,000. Linda Pace had not won $50,000 yet when she decided she was going to give it away. She had decided before the taping started, on the drive to Atlanta, somewhere outside of Meridian, Mississippi, with her coffee going cold in the thermos and the sun still not up yet. She had told herself, if we win, it goes to Marcus. She had not told her children because she knew they would have worried, and she had decided she didn't need them to agree. It was her winnings to give. It was her cracker drawer. It was her nightstand. She won 200 points. Steve Harvey handed her the check. She slid it back. And then Linda Pace did something that no contestant in Family Feud's 50-year history had ever done on stage. She reached into the pocket of her yellow cardigan and pulled out the folded piece of paper and unfolded it and handed it to Steve Harvey and said, "I need you to call this number." The studio fell completely silent. Steve Harvey looked at the piece of paper. He looked at Linda. He looked at the piece of paper again. He said, "Ma'am." That was all he said. Just, "Ma'am." Linda explained. She was not a dramatic woman. Her daughter Carla would say this later on 4 separate television appearances. Mama is not dramatic. Mama is just clear. Linda explained about the crackers and the journal page and the room number and the medication authorization and the 14 months and the $50,000. She explained it in the same voice she had used for 29 years, telling parents that their child had a fever or needed glasses or was coming to the nurse's office for crackers because something at home wasn't right. Matter of fact, present. No performance. Steve Harvey stood at the podium and did not move until she finished. Then, he set the piece of paper down very carefully, the way you set something down when you are afraid of what you will do with your hands if you don't give them a task. And he turned away from the audience for a moment. His shoulders moved. When he turned back, he said, "Stop everything." In 12 years of tapings at that facility, the production had never been stopped for a non-technical reason. The floor manager looked at the producer. The producer looked at Steve. Steve was already walking off the stage toward the production area. He came back 2 minutes later with a production coordinator's cell phone and walked directly to Linda Pace and said 5 words she would repeat for the rest of her life. "We are calling him now." He dialed room 412 at Ochsner Medical Center on a Thursday afternoon at 2:15 p.m. The phone rang 3 times. Marcus Webb, 43 years old, who had been on dialysis at 7 a.m. that morning and had returned to his room and was watching television because there was nothing else to do, answered his cell phone and said hello to a number he didn't recognize. Steve Harvey said, "Marcus, my name is Steve Harvey. I'm standing next to someone who wants to say something to you." There was a silence on the other end of the line that lasted long enough for the boom operator to later describe it as the loudest quiet I've ever recorded. Linda took the phone. She said, "Marcus, it's Mrs. Linda, from West Side Elementary." Another silence. Then a sound that was not a word. It was the sound of a grown man who has been holding something for a very long time and has just been given permission to put it down. Linda said, "I read what you wrote about the crackers." She said, "I kept them stocked because you mattered." She said, "I need you to let us help you now." The studio fell completely silent. 3 crew members were crying before Linda finished the sentence. A camera operator, a man who had been working television production for 22 years, set his camera down on its mount and pressed his fist against his mouth. The audience, which had been still since Linda slid the check back, made a sound that was less applause and more exhale, like 200 people releasing something at the same time. But Steve wasn't done. He took the phone back gently and said, "Marcus, I want to tell you something." He looked at the floor for a moment. Then he said, "Let me tell you something. 20-something years ago, I was living in my car, a 1976 Ford Tempo. And there was a man at a gas station who stopped and said, 'God's got a plan bigger than your pain.' I held on to that for years. I was you, Marcus. I was waiting for someone to make one phone call that changed the direction of everything." He paused. "This is that call. Do you understand me? This is that call." The studio fell completely silent for the 3rd time. Steve wasn't done. He turned to the competing family, the Reyes family from Houston, Texas, who had been watching from the green room monitor and had come to the stage doorway, and he waved them out. The Reyes family walked onto the stage. Their eldest, a 71-year-old man named George Reyes, walked to Linda Pace and shook her hand with both of his and said, "My mother was on dialysis for 4 years. God bless you." He turned to the camera. "God bless you, Marcus." Steve addressed the camera directly. He looked into the lens and said, "Everyone watching at home, what you just saw is what a human being looks like when they decide that winning is not the point. Linda Pace came here today, and she already knew what she was going to do if she won. She kept crackers in a drawer for a child 30 years ago, and she never stopped." He turned back to Linda. "You never stopped." The phone was still connected. Marcus Webb, from room 412 at Ochsner Medical Center, said one more thing before the call ended. He said, "Mrs. Linda, I'm going to make it." Linda nodded like she was in her office, and a child had just told her their stomach felt better. "I know you are," she said. "I know you are." The edited segment, 14 minutes assembled from 73 minutes of uninterrupted footage, was released through the Family Feud YouTube channel 7 weeks later. In the first 24 hours, it received 28 million views. By the end of the first week, 114 million. By the end of its first year, 420 million, making it the most viewed single clip in the show's history, and the second most shared television moment on social media in 2021, behind only a Super Bowl halftime clip that had a 47-year head start in terms of cultural infrastructure. The hashtag #SheSlideItBack trended in 34 countries over 9 days and generated 6.1 million original posts, the majority from teachers, nurses, cafeteria workers, and school custodians, sharing stories of the children they had quietly kept an eye on. The $50,000 went directly to a patient advocacy firm in New Orleans that Linda had identified before the taping. The firm resolved Marcus Webb's medication authorization in 31 days. He moved to active status on the transplant list in November 2021. He received a kidney in March 2022. His transplant surgeon called the surgery textbook. Marcus was discharged after 6 days. Linda established the Cracker Drawer Fund 4 months after the taping, named, she told the nonprofit filing attorney, after the bottom drawer. The fund supports patient navigation services for low-income dialysis patients facing insurance authorization delays. In its first 2 years, the fund served 890 patients across 7 states. Marcus Webb joined the fund's advisory board in January 2023, attending meetings by video call from Baton Rouge, where he had relocated to be closer to Linda. In 2023, Steve Harvey was asked in a long-form interview which moment from the show's run he would preserve if he could only keep one. He said, without pausing, "A woman in a yellow cardigan slid a check back to me, and she had already decided. She had already decided before she sat in that chair. That's the one. That's the one I keep." Brianna, Linda's granddaughter, kept the royal blue shirt with the hand-drawn star. She wears it to Marcus's advisory board meetings when she can attend, which is most of them. Linda Pace still drives herself everywhere. She retired the 2009 Camry in 2022 and bought a used Buick, the same color as her cardigan. She keeps a bag of crackers in the glove compartment. She says it's a habit. Carla says it's a theology. Some people walk into a game show to win. Linda Pace walked in knowing that winning was just the mechanism, the thing that made the phone call possible. She had been preparing for that phone call for 30 years, one cracker at a time, in a bottom drawer in a school in Baton Rouge. What looks like generosity from the outside is, up close, just someone finishing what they started. That is the thing about the people who change things quietly. They were never waiting for a stage. They were just waiting for the number to reach $50,000. If this story stayed with you, please share it with someone who has been a quiet keeper for a child they barely knew. Subscribe so you never miss a story like Linda's. And if someone kept a drawer stocked for you once, drop their name in the comments. It's time they heard about it.